What's up, guys? We're back with another Super 7 Ultimates TMNT review, another Wave 3 figure, and probably my most anticipated of this particular wave, and that's really because of how amazing Bebop was in Wave 2. So we are, of course, taking a look at his partner, well, in crime, literally. We're taking a look at ROCKSTEADY. This figure, just like Bebop, when you get this box in hand, you're going to be sort of shook by how heavy this thing is. He's a beefy boy. So we've got him here, of course, with the slipcover, but being the sole bad guy in this wave, he gets the purple treatment. So you've got the purple slipcover, the ROCKSTEADY manhole cover, and then the Turtles logo, of course, on the back. Pop it off, and we've, of course, got him there in all of his monstrous glory. I mean, look at the size of that head. It's humongous. So he's there in the window. You've got the blue, purplish brick background, Turtles logo on the front, windows on the side, and then, of course, you've got a bigger brickscape on the back with the big foot graffiti logo, and then a nice bio for our rhino dude here. So let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here we go, our big boy of the wave, our Ultimates ROCKSTEADY. So just like Bebop, this guy is wild. He is incredibly massive, and he is one of those figures where Super 7 sort of took some liberties in terms of their interpretation of him and gave us this absolutely enormous Rhino Mutant Man. So let's get started, see what this guy can do, see how he moves around. He is, again, very similar to Bebop. He is very, very similar. They are the same kind of figure when it comes to construction and what they are capable of in this line. So as far as moving him around, you have, well, this massive noggin on his head, and I really can't stress how enormous his head is. It's like 3 inches long. So it goes up pretty good. It doesn't really do much down though, and it's basically because his lower jaw will hit his sort of his neckline there, and he's one of those characters that sort of hunches forward, so his head sort of juts out from his body, which kind of changes things up. So he's got a little bit of tilt here as well. He has full rotation, but of course, being one of those kinds of, you know, characters where they sort of lurch forward, it sort of looks weird. So it's there, but it's not exactly practical. And that's not really a figure problem, it's just more of a, that's what happens when a neck lurches forward like that. Arms go out at the shoulders. They, of course, rotate all the way around. No bicep swivel on this guy, but you've got your single jointed rotating elbow. You've got lateral hinges and rotation on him in the box. We've got our waist twist on this guy. And he does like sort of bobble back and forth, but it's not exactly a point of articulation. This is one of those instances where I really wish that at some point we could see more influence from like Mythic Legions, since, you know, the Horsemen are, of course, sculpting these guys. Is it possible to put a ball peg at the waist here like we see with, say, the Ogre scale figures in Legions, something that's a much bigger figure, and that you can maybe get a little bit more tilt forward, because he could use it. It would make these guys, him and Bebop in particular, a little bit more menacing if they could sort of, you know, lurch forward in some way. Legs kick out all the way. They kick forward all the way. You do get a little bit on the back. There is, of course, your thigh twist up there. We've got our single jointed rotating knee. And then you've got really, really good rocker. Nothing in the way on those. And a really good hinge as well, which does have a slight ratcheted feel to it, which of course is going to be helpful for posing such a big figure. So yeah, he's basically the same kind of figure as Bebop. If you've got him, you basically know what to expect. He's still very par for the course for the line in general, but being such a big figure, he is a little bit different just in a general sense. But he is very, very similar to the other big monster mutant in the line so far, and you should be able to pose him pretty easily without much fuss. The aesthetics on this guy are ultimately, no pun intended, what I'm most interested in here. Just like with Bebop, and I'm going to have to keep going back to him, because Bebop was such a huge surprise. I didn't expect him to be that big until I got him out of the package. ROCKSTEADY, of course, I kind of knew what to expect going into this, but it's no less exciting. And I know there's some folks out there that kind of, you know, could go a different way when it comes to scaling and sizing in this line, because in the vintage line, Bebop and ROCKSTEADY, I mean, just like pretty much every other figure, were all the same size. There wasn't a big height variance between figures. But I like what Super 7 decided to do with this. In thinking about it, it kind of makes sense that baby turtles could mutate into, their size, but humans that are mutated with large animals could potentially mutate into something much bigger. So I do like the idea that these guys are massive and humongous, and I mean they are really, really big. And I just like their presence on the shelf. I think I'd be happy with them if they were shorter and smaller and maybe more in line with the turtles. But I'm also much happier that Super 7 decided to do something a little bit different with them and make them enormous, because it adds to a lot of wow factor and sort of oomph and, again, presence with these figures. Bebop and Rocksteady look fantastic, and Rocksteady is a great addition to this line. He's sculpted incredibly well, tons and tons of detail all over, all the like wrinkles and texture of, a rhino. Like they have that sort of thick, leathery hide almost, and it comes through with this figure really nicely. There's a ton of wash all over the figure to bring out all those details. You've got the stitching on his, like the sutures on his arm. He's got the little communicator. We've got his gauntlet with like bullets in there. You've got his belt with all the pouches. And of course the ever-present like turtle shells that he and Bebop wear. The camo on the pants, really nicely done, really cleanly applied. I like that quite a bit. The tank top is textured, so it's got, like that sort of weave patterning that you would see on fabric. And I think he looks great. I'm really happy with him. He's not as crazily detailed, I think, as Bebop is, because Bebop's vintage design has a lot of weird little things in it, like all the shells and the bones that hang off of him, the brace on his leg. Rocksteady doesn't have that kind of stuff. He's a little bit, I don't want to use the word more basic, but he's not as crazily detailed as Bebop, but he matches the vintage figure really, really well. And what really gets me on this guy is, it's probably quite obvious, is the head sculpt. Look at it. It is humongous. It's absolutely massive. This is kind of a weird comparison, but just for size sake, here it is with a reaction figure. Look how big this thing is. So this is a 3 3/4 inch figure. It's almost as long as a reaction figure. It's huge. It's a massive, massive head sculpt, and I think it looks great. It's easily the most defining aspect of this figure, and it's just wild. I really like it. It's goofy looking. It's weird. It's definitely going to catch your eye. You've got, the helmet on his head there, kind of one of the hallmarks for Rocksteady. It's got a nice patina to it. You've got the goggles on the front, the straps that run down. The horns look really worn and nasty. There's tons and tons of that black wash on the gray skin as well. And you've got a few of those teeth peeking out either side. I was almost of the thought that he might have had an articulated jaw when I got him out of the box, because this is a separate piece, but it's not. So don't try to pry it off, I suppose. And then you've got those sort of muted red eyes with the gray pupil in there, with the ears sticking out of that helmet. I just love everything about this head sculpt. It, again, is very, very indicative of that vintage figure. It's a big vintage callback to have this massive noggin, because even on the vintage figure, it's a really large head in comparison to the body. It might be a little bit more exaggerated here, but again, I'm happy and very much here for Super 7 making figures incredibly large when, of course, they are mutants from animals that are incredibly large. So a rhino is a massive, massive beast of an animal, and I think Rocksteady being a huge figure that towers over our turtles works really well. And I think they really just killed it. Sculpt, paint, deco, the whole deal. This is a really, really solid looking figure. And then, of course, we have our Rocksteady comparison. So we've got our vintage Playmates here. We've got our NECA Toon, and of course Super 7 Ultimates in the back. And you can see these guys share a lot of similarities. Rocksteady's not an overly super weird, gross out, detailed vintage figure. He's not one of that type. It's weird to say he's a little more plain for a mutant rhino guy, but he doesn't have tons and tons of stuff to him. But I think that Super 7 really, really nailed this one and kind of gave him a little more oomph with a lot of that wash and just beefing him up so much. And then, of course, we've got the Toon comparison, which, frankly, there's not a lot to compare to. They're entirely different aesthetics, and I really don't like comparing the look and feel of a Super 7 figure to a NECA, because they're just so different. It's two versions of the same character, but you can see, for one, the size difference. Rocksteady is humongous by comparison to the NECA, and this is a big figure to begin with. This is no slouch when it comes to size and, heft and mass, because he's a fat rhino guy. But our incredibly muscular, svelte Super 7 Ultimates ROCKSTEADY just towers over both of them. I think he looks tremendous. Very good reinterpretation, modernizing of the vintage figure, and it's a nice little cross section, again, like we've been doing for the rest of this wave, of various ROCKSTEADYs of this particular era. And then as far as size comparisons go, we've got probably the ones that matter the most. So within the Turtles line, we've got Bebop, and then we've got Leo to give you an idea of how he scales with the Turtle. Obviously, he absolutely just dwarfs them. But this was really an important one because when I got this guy in, I just knew that he was huge just based on how heavy the box was. But getting them together, it gives you confirmation, of course, that they are basically the same size. Bebop might be slightly taller just to the tip of his mohawk, but overall, I mean, they're essentially the exact same kind of figure. They don't really have the same parts, but I think you get what I mean here in terms of everything is scaled within these two. They're like their own little subset where Super7 made sure that they were the same kind of figure. Now, as far as a non-Turtles Ultimate, here is Rhino from Thundercats. So, of course, a more normal 7-inch figure. And you can see that, I mean, even he is dwarfed in height, mass, the whole deal. He looks small by comparison. And then let's get some non-Super7 stuff. So here he is with a NECA turtle. So that's the disguised Leo. And then a larger kind of figure. Here he is with Equidron from, well, Shadow Equidron from Mythic Legions. You can see, I mean, this guy is meant to be massive, and he of course puts ROCKSTEADY in his place. And then for something more normal 1/12, here is a classified series G.I. Joe figure. So there's a Duke to give you an idea of what he looks like. That, and then just for one more, let's throw in a tiny guy. For comparison, we've got a Plunderling there to give you an idea of his overall size. I mean, he's a massive figure. Of course, there are much bigger figures than ROCKSTEADY out there, but this is definitely a big, big boy within the confines of the Ultimates, which of course is already a large line to begin with. Now, as far as accessories goes, ROCKSTEADY is very similar to Bebop in terms of what he comes with, because he doesn't really have much outside of the normal vintage-inspired accessories. He even has less than Bebop because of the fact that he doesn't have an extra head. But Bebop's was sort of a, let's give them a way to have their figure not be super vintagey with that really pink head, which I really like. And ROCKSTEADY doesn't really have that thing. His head was a rhino head. So there's really no issue in terms of making that different or, you know, giving fans something they might have thought they wanted. This guy looks fine. I'm fine that he doesn't have an alt head. He is part of a small subset of figures in this line as a result, though, but I think that's okay. So what he does come with, though, is his gun. So he's got the big rifle here, and it has no real paint on it. It's got like this metallic fleck to it. Might be able to pick that up in the light. Sculpt is really good on it, but I wish it had something, even like the scope on it, maybe to have some sort of sight or something on it just to make it pop. He doesn't have any trigger finger hands either, which I'm not too beat up about. Bebop doesn't either, but at the same time, I kind of wish he had something. It fits in his hand just fine, and because he has such massive hands, I'm wondering if that's maybe why he doesn't, but at the same time, I still kind of wish he did. We've got the knife, which has like a metallic sort of almost gunmetal-y color blade here with a black handle. And then you get the sewer manhole cover lid here, which has like a silvery metallic dry brushing on top of it to help it pop a little bit more. This, just like Bebop's shield, is really difficult at times to get in his hands. The tolerance on them seems to be pretty high. I haven't needed to heat his hand up to get it in there, but at the same time, it was not easy either. So you might just want to heat it up. That's definitely what I had to do with Bebop to make that work. And then he does get a few grenades. So you get these green grenades with sort of a silver gunmetal-y color for the handle and the clip on there. You get 3 of these little guys, and I don't really know what you're going to do with them, honestly. They sit in his hand, but at the same time, like, you're not going to do a great deal with them, and there's nowhere really to put them on him either. You can sort of maybe try to get them to sit around his tank top, but it's not going to work. So he's got those. I'm not too sure what I plan to do with him yet, but he does have them as an option. Shove them into those hands. And then he does get a pair of fists as his one set of alternate hands. And then, of course, in typical fashion, we get our weapons rack sprue system to pay tribute to the vintage playmates. So you get the gun, the knife, the shield, and of course the 3 grenades. So like I said, he doesn't have a ton of stuff, and I do wish that a few things might have been changed, like the gun could use a little bit of paint, but otherwise he has everything you really need to recreate that vintage ROCKSTEADY. He just doesn't have much beyond that. But at the same time, I was always going to use these anyway. So yeah, I mean, this guy is a winner, and there's a good chance that he's going to be a lot of people's favorites in the wave, I think. Just like Bebop was a runaway hit in Wave 2, ROCKSTEADY is more of the same. He's that kind of figure. He's huge, he's beefy, he's hulking, he's got good, solid accessories, but it all comes down to his design, and honestly, Super7 reinterpreting him as being this big, hulking rhino monster, it really works for me. Just like Bebop really worked for me, this does the same. It never crossed my mind that he should be as small as the turtles. If anything, he should be a little bit bigger, and I'm glad that they went a lot bigger because it makes for a tremendous shelf presence. Sculpt, paint, deco, accessories, the whole deal on this guy is really, really fantastic, and being able to pair him alongside Bebop, throw him with Shredder, is just a great deal of fun. I'm absolutely loving this figure. So that's going to do it for this look at the Super7 Ultimates ROCKSTEADY. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.